everyone, and welcome to today's episode of Let's Talk About Health. I'm your host, Madeline Mant, and today I'm really delighted to introduce our guest, Lane Warmbrod, who is here to tell us all about her work as a biosecurity analyst. So welcome to the show, Lane.
Hi, thank you.
So this is super interesting. Can you tell me, what is the role of a biosecurity analyst? What does your day-to-day look like?
Yeah, so it's very different every day. Biosecurity is a very broad field that covers everything from trying to make sure that our biological technologies and technologies in the life science don't cause unintentional harm, or people aren't doing research that they shouldn't be doing, to things like how do we prepare for a pandemic, or how would we respond if something was accidentally escaped from a lab? So it's a very broad field, and there's different things to do every day. I've been doing a lot looking at one of the international non-proliferation treaties, the Biological Weapons Treaty, and trying to work to strengthen that and make sure that we don't see bioweapons being made across the world and distributed or used.
Absolutely. Now, you mentioned things being really different day to day. This might be a huge question, but have things shifted massively because we're living during a pandemic?
Oh, yeah. A lot changed with the pandemic. Before the pandemic, bioweapons were kind of the weird stepchild of weapons of mass destruction. So there was a lot of attention paid to nukes and quite a bit of attention on chemical weapons. And then bioweapons were kind of off on the side and no one really paid attention. But the pandemic made people realize, biological agents pose a really big risk, or can pose a really big risk. So we need to pay more attention to those. And so there's been a lot more interest and talk around the BWC and bioweapons. And then also, there's been a lot of allegations from Russia, especially as they've invaded Ukraine, about US and Ukraine bioweapon involvement. So that has also drastically ramped up the interest and activity going on in this space.
For sure. Now, when you talk about some of your day-to-day, are you looking at epidemiological data? Are you looking at media headlines? Like, what sort of information are you actually analyzing?
Yeah, so it's really interesting because there's a ton of different information we get to use. We have media headlines, we have intelligence data, we have social media data, like aggregating tweets to try to understand what's happening. We have just international relations, a lot of meeting with other countries to try to strengthen ties and work through issues. We do a lot of analysis of what papers are being published, what research is being done in different places, even looking at genetic sequencing. So that's something that's become pretty common with COVID, looking at the virus sequence to kind of tell epi data. We do that too. So there's all sorts of data that we look at and use and try to aggregate to understand what's happening.
So it sounds like you're a person of many, many hats. I'm hearing lots of different sources of data there. Now, this is coming from an anthropological perspective, and we've been talking a lot about questions of language. And so terms like health and illness and wellness and sickness. And I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about how you actually engage with some of those types of words in your work.
Yeah. So it's a little weird because if we're on the international stage and we're talking in the context of the BWC, which is an international treaty, some of the definitions are purposely vague because that's what they needed to get it ratified. Like, what is the definition of a bioweapon? Is it something that only affects humans? Is it something that affects animals too? So there's a lot of fuzziness in those definitions. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of, in that same sense, the terms health and illness are also kind of fuzzy in the field, because you'll have health. It's like, who defines what's healthy? Is it who gets to decide that? And from a genetic standpoint, because we do also do genetics, or at least I personally have genetics as one of the areas that I work in within health security. We're talking about healthy genes and unhealthy genes, but who gets to decide where a gene starts and ends? And two, what makes it healthy, what makes it wild type, what makes it whatever. So the biologist in me is going to go with our classic answer of it depends. But yeah.
It sounds like there's a lot of interesting ethical quandaries wrapped up in that too. So there'd be a whole other set of vocabulary to sort of engage with.
Oh, 100%. When I give my elevator spiel about what I'm trying to do with my career, I say I'm trying to minimize the risks of technology and life sciences while equitably maximizing benefits and making sure there's an equitable distribution of both the burdens of the risk and the access to benefits. Because, I mean, so often we'll have these technologies, we'll have these incredible things that have come about from maybe somewhat risky research, but who actually gets the benefit of that and who's carrying the burden of it?
Absolutely. This is all bioethics. I'm super, super fascinated. Now, I'm sure that the folks that are watching this video that have made it this far are also really, really fascinated. And I heard you mention biology there and some genetics and public policy. So how might somebody actually take steps to work in biosecurity?
So the nice thing about biosecurity is that it's very, very nebulous. There's a lot of different ways to come into it. There's very few degree programs out there that are specific for biosecurity, which is actually a good thing because it's a field where it really helps if you have one like core foundation area that you're bringing into it. So you can, I know people who have come in from like international security, poli-sci or political science, genetics like myself, infectious disease, public health, I work with 2 anthropologists. So there's a ton of different ways you can come into the field, and they're all really valuable. And I think biosecurity, we're strongest when we're working towards these issues if we have a very interdisciplinary team working on it. So honestly, if you're interested in this field, just do whatever speaks most to you or you find most interesting and find a biosecurity problem to approach with that training and that mindset and perspective from. So it can be really hard, but there's also a lot of pathways in.
Absolutely. Well, that is excellent. And that's really, really good advice for anybody that is watching this, that of course, there are many, many pathways to get to some of these major goals, and the skills that you're getting in your degree are applicable to lots of different problems out there.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, thank you, Lane, so much for your time today, for sharing your thoughts and your story with us. And thanks also to our audience for joining us on this episode. And we will see you next time on Let's Talk About Health.